right, everybody, we got a huge artist here today, the legendary Gerry Beckley from the legendary America, and so stoked to have you here, my brother. I grew up listening to your music. I was just going back through your catalog, and it kind of made me realize how many of your songs I'm really a fan of. And some of them I didn't actually know were America. I think they're just part of the classic rock continuum. And when I'm here, I'm like, oh, that's America too. Wow, you guys really killed it with the hits over the years. So I'm stoked to talk to you. My dad's jealous that I'm talking to you as well. He's the one who kind of made me a fan as well, I think. Actually, a little later in the show, I have a little clip we're gonna play. He just wanted to say hey and thank you, and actually has a really good question about one of your lyrics. So hopefully you'll indulge me with that. So
of course.
So we want to talk about, what's crazy about you and America is you guys are still doing it. And I saw an old clip of you in I think an 80s interview, and you were saying, hey, it's not true that you can't keep rocking in your 40s or 50s or 60s or whatever it might be. You were just like, the rock and roll's new. That's the only reason there's no old rockers yet, is because we haven't got to the age where you can't be that old yet. But I think you mentioned the Rolling Stones, and you're like, those guys are still doing it. and amazingly, what is it? 40 years later, they are still doing it. I think they might be immortal. But if you wouldn't mind just taking us back, because a lot of people, some people may know, some people may not know, the band America actually got started in the UK. Would you mind taking us back a little and telling us how you guys met and how you guys got started?
We were all sons of U.S. Air Force servicemen, and happened to be stationed in a base outside of London in the late 60s. So we went to high school together, and the three founding, Dewey, Bunnell, and Dan Peake, original founding member, we were all in the class of 69. So Dewey and I met in the 67, 68, our 11th grade year. And then Dan came to the school in 68, 69. We played in kind of top 40 bands together for that last year or so in high school. And those bands were really just cover bands. You had to learn whatever the hits were of the week or the year, and play the dance at the teen club. And after we graduated, all three of us, Dan went back to college back in the States for just one semester, and Dewey and I got jobs working on the bass. But we stayed in touch, and it turned out that all three of us had been writing original material. And so when Dan came back, I think on a Christmas break after his first semester, we got together and, hey, I've got some songs too. And that all became basically the first album. I had made some contacts in London. I'd been doing some sessions, and so I met a few people, and one thing led to another, and pretty soon we were playing in the offices of quite a few of the major record companies, and actually got an offer from quite a few of them, but we chose the Warner Brothers lovely roster of artists at that time, with Neil Young and Joni, and just a great place to be, and that's where we did the first album, did it in London.
Yeah, you guys, I actually learned an interesting fact about you guys while brushing up. You guys, one of the first names was the Days before you were America. Is that true?
Yeah. Days with a Z or with a Z.
Uh-huh.
That was a group in high school. It was a lovely group. Two brothers, Bob and Mike Merrill. They were very talented guys. And I suppose they could have been a part of this journey. But like many kids, when you graduated from the school, there was no reason to really stay in England if college was in your plans. So the school kind of scatters,
Sure.
And so as a result, growing up in that kind of environment, you meet kids from that school all over, because all service families, and they're just scattered all over the planet.
Yeah. So how did I hear correctly that it was maybe a DJ friend or something of yours who kind of passed your stuff along to some of these record guys, and that's how you started getting connected, or were they just starting to see you play live, or a little bit of both?
We hadn't really started playing live too much, but I had been doing some sessions, and there was a group that I had been kind of just not subbing for. I was helping out with some recording, and I played some guitar on it. And that group was getting shopped around, and that tape got to Warner Brothers in London. And the A&R guy at Warner said, I'm not really hearing it, but and then the guitar solo up, and he said, that's pretty good. Who's that? And the guy, in full disclosure, said, well, that's actually a American kid who was helping us out, a guy named Gerry Beckley, and he said he's got his own band, and the guy said, "Well, bring me that band." So kind of side out way, they got us in the door.
That was nice of him to point him in the right direction. It's a little sad for him, but nice that he pointed them in your direction. Did I hear correctly that the name America came from maybe a jukebox? Is that, because I was going to ask, you guys were some American kids in the UK, and maybe you're like, hey, we're Americans, we're in a different country. Maybe that's a fun way of just kind of repping where we're from, or being our identity. But did it actually come from a jukebox?
And well, what you just said, I think, had a lot to do with it. We thought, we knew that by picking that name, tell something about us, and so that was clearly a part of it. But I'm not sure which came first, cart or the horse, but there was a jukebox in the cafeteria on the base called the Americana. The jukebox was an Americana model, and most jukeboxes were either Seeburg or Wurlitz, or I can't remember which this was. But when we saw that name, we thought, oh, that's a sign. But I think seeing the jukebox was like a confirmation that maybe the name was a good idea, as opposed to the start of the idea.
Right. That's funny. It's kind of like confirmation from something you're already thinking about, though. I feel like, it's like if you buy a new car, or you're thinking about buying a new car, you start seeing that car everywhere in the road, and you're like, oh, so maybe you were just noticing it because you were talking about it, but it,
yeah. I'm a little vague on that, but it was one or both of those stories.
So you guys have such like a soothing vocal to your music. Was it kind of immediate when you guys first started playing together? Like, as soon as you guys got in a room and started kind of playing together, were you feeling that? Did you guys cultivate that sound right away, or did it take some time?
Well, harmonies are obviously an integral part of the sound, and they were really, from the very first album, a lot of 3-part harmony, a lot of switching of lead vocals. One of the things that you learn very early on, if this is what you do and you sing, and even in not doing original material, is the harmonies are about a blend, and that blend is something that you can kind of learn, but there's a whole lot of that is really kind of in the hands of the gods. It has to do with the timbre of each voice, the range of each voice. And if you listen to the amazing blend of the Beach Boys or the Beatles or groups that did multi harmonies, there's a signature to each one of those, which is why a Beach Boy 4-part harmony is going to sound different than a Beatle 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
And you could break apart each one and say, oh, there's Brian on the top voice, and there's Mike Love's always in the bass and stuff. Similar with us, in that Dan Peake usually had the high parts and stuff. But if the voices don't blend, to put it simply, you're not going to get that sound. I think in our case, there was we each had a very interesting, slightly different, unique sound to our voices, but there wasn't a signature kind of Joe Cocker-esque kind of gravelly guy in there that would have kind of drawn it away from the smooth 3-part thing you're talking about. It's a lot of that is out of your control, but certainly with harmonies, there's not a lot of room for error. You've got to know what notes you're after, and everybody's got to hit the notes and stuff. That's
especially in the days before auto-tune and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, obviously that's a whole nother topic, but for years and years we had to actually sing the parts and nail stuff. I ended up doing a lot of vocal sessions in my career, and I did a lot of stuff just kind of behind the scenes with both Timothy Schmidt, who's now been for years in the Eagles, and Andrew Gold, the late Andrew Gold. And we did a ton of sessions for other records and movies and things, just because we were pretty good at hitting the notes, and they knew if they brought us in, we could nail it in a take or two and double it or whatever was needed. So there's a knack to it. You gotta know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a great way of describing it. It's kind of like the voice of America is your 3 voices combined, and you can't really replicate that combination. I've heard some interesting analyzations of like the way that Paul and John's voice would mix together had it's like uniquely Beatles. You know what I mean? Sure. It was, Paul's a little bit more like, and John was kind of his foil in that kind of had a little bit more of a minor tone, or a little bit more he was kind of the foil to Paul. Yeah, exactly.
And well, each one of these is a unique story. And in the case of the Beatles, originally there was a lot of unison singing. If you look at the videos and stuff, a lot of times they would be both singing the same melody along. together. And then it would break into 2-part, and Paul was always on the high part and stuff.
Right.
And if it was 3-part, very often George would be on the bottom or in the middle. It's a fascinating thing if you want to dive deeply into that. But if you think about like a collective sound, I always love to use the Beach Boys because there's such distinct voices.
Yeah.
You know, it had this really nasal-like love sound, and then over the top, it was inevitably always these Brian Wilson falsetto things. So each one has a very different sound. But when you think of it, like Dewey singing Horse with No Name sounds quite a bit different than me singing I Need You, but you combine them all and you get that sound.
When you get that beautiful America sound. Yeah. Dude, I was thinking about it just, and maybe my surroundings were influencing me, but I was listening to your music this morning and I was driving back from the beach, and I feel like, and I might be biased because I'm from California, and like I said, I was just coming from the beach, but I feel like your music feels like California a little bit. Do you get that? Or do you feel that?
Yeah.
Did that come from someplace?
Well, you know, you are what you create is in theory kind of a super group of all your influences you've heard through your life. So your own particular combination is going to be whatever those that formed your earliest inspiration. California sound, obviously, again, to go back to the surf music, I would think that was in a sense the birth of that kind of sound. But in addition, there's this whole kind of moniker of West Coast music. I know in Europe, there used to be, even back in the old days of vinyl, there'd be a West Coast section in the record stores. And it would be things like Us and the Eagles, Loggins and Messina and stuff. And so in a sense, you know, Horse and Ventura Highway, some of our signature songs, they're all written in rainy England. You know,
right. That's why I was asking. That's why I'm interested, because you're writing this music in cloudy England.
But you're emulating that. Yeah, you're emulating that kind of thing. One of the ironies of that whole West Coast thing, and doesn't take much scraping to get down to this truth, is that most of us were immigrants. You know, the Eagles and Don and Glenn. Don's a Detroit guy, and Don is a Texas guy, and Glenn was from Detroit. Neil Young is from Canada. Joni's from Canada. Meaning that not a lot were, you know, Stephen Stills is from Florida. So same with Dewey and I. We came, you know, from England in a sense. I'd never even seen California until '72 when we came there to tour.
Right. Really interesting. You said you kind of got label attention before you even started playing live, but I heard some cool stories about some of your early shows when you were just 17. You were opening for like Elton John and The Who and Pink Floyd, and they were already a little bit more established, right? So that was that like a mind blowing for you as a high school kid?
Yeah. Put it mildly, they're a little more. There's an extreme example. First of all, we got on those shows because we had a manager at the time, a guy named Jeff Dexter, who was really a fascinating guy. And his main gig had been in and around London, DJing all the major festivals. So he was the DJ at the Isle of Wight Festival and a lot of these big things. But he was also the weekly DJ at the Roundhouse, which was the underground cool venue in London. So as a result, got on a lot of these bills, and we were like 17 years old, sitting on stools, and we did like a 20-minute acoustic set before Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd came out with a 90-piece orchestra and choir and played Adam Hart Mother.
Yeah.
So mind-blowing, to be honest, you know, to be a kid, and of course we were fans and stuff. We played in Wembley at the Oval, not even the cricket grounds, which is even bigger than the stadium. And that was with The Who and the Faces, Rod and the Faces. And so these were unbelievable. You know, obviously we were playing first. We'd go out there and do our acoustic number and stuff. And, you know, of course, now you're backstage for the whole fiasco. Great, lovely memories, great experiences.
Yeah. How was it? Was that some of your first taste of, you know, that rock and roll life, hanging out with some of those guys backstage?
I'm not exactly sure the circumstances, but we ended up getting to know Ronnie Wood very well. And this was when he was still in the Faces and stuff. And so I ended up living at his house in London when I would be there. I'd stay at his place, and he and his wife at the time would stay at my house in LA. So yeah, it was like diving in the deep end, you know?
Yeah.
I met some wonderful people, by the way, because Ronnie's a party and a half just on a quiet day. And so there would always be, he'd bring Bobby Womack to the house or Bowie over to the house and stuff. And it was just for, you know, for a young kid. We had the first album out, and the second album did even better as far as sales. So it wasn't like we were owned by that point, but it was still amazing experience.
How was it being a kid hanging out at a house and then Bowie shows up? like, what was that like? What was he like
Pretty
kind
far.
of behind closed doors? Was he as kind of like eccentric as he was in front of the camera, or was he a little more mellow?
Well, you know, I'm not a total expert on all the different, because if ever there was a Renaissance guy, Bowie was an example of that. You know, he had all of his different eras, his White Duke and Ziggy and all these things. But I had a piano in this house, and so it was often during the 70s, there was obviously a revolving door of people, and Harry Nilsson was a dear friend, and he would always bring people up. But I seem to remember it would always be a gathering around the piano, and everybody would be playing and singing along. So it was obviously pretty far out time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Our very first album was engineered by Ken Scott, who was right in the middle of his run of Bowie records. I think he had just finished The Man Who Sold the World and was about to do Hunky Dory, or it was between Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust. But you know, we were right in the middle of that creative place. You know, that was Trident Studios, and right in the middle of Soho on Water Street. You know, legendary stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, it seems like you guys kind of had the movie experience of literally just you were saying we hardly played any live shows, and you know, Warner Brothers is already knocking on our door, and I'm 17 and I'm hanging out with Bowie and playing shows with The Who and Elton John. So you guys pretty much had, you know, a straight to the top success, and then you guys just exploded like with your first album. How was that? Were you able to handle it as a kid? Was it awesome, or were there times where you're like, whoa, this is a little too much for me?
Well, I always say now, because being asked that quite often, there's absolutely nothing I would change, because you don't want to mess with whatever point here.
Sure.
And obviously there were times more challenging than others, but in general, you know, your number one, your first album and single goes number one around the world. It's very hard to fault that in any capacity. We were very, very fortunate. I don't want to give the impression that we didn't gig. We did gig all over that first year. We had a van. We played all over Holland and every little club in the UK. So there was some live experience, but it was smaller crowds and just us, you know, in the corner with our little PA system. And so when it happened, we immediately pushed the big button and moved to California. We went from living in a little cottage to moving into David Geffen's house. And the only other house guest was Joni Mitchell at the time. And she was writing, I think Blue, it was already out. So it was maybe Court and Spark or something. Just an incredibly creative time to be in Joni's orbit.
Yeah.
But he put us together with a law firm, a business manager and stuff. And to this day, you know, we are still working with a lot of those people. So I think those moves he made very early on were very protective. That kind of kept us, at least for all of those aspects that could have come off the rails, you know, business-wise and overspending and stuff. I think we had some good advice, and I think that helped a great deal. Yeah,
you must have had those are some really solid roots if you're still, you know, hanging out with the same people. It says a lot. It's been a long time. And so you guys, you know, of course, huge song, Horse with No Name, and then you guys go on to win a Grammy for Best New Artist, right?
Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, what's a great side note to that was you beat the Eagles for Best New Artist. I mean,
it's never supposed to be a competition, right? This way, and the Grammy goes to, or the Oscar goes to, tough category, Best New Artist, because it very often implies, you know, who's made the biggest impact that year. And unfortunately, that is very often followed by some kind of a follow-up bit about, you know, one-hit wonder or something. If you go and read the list of Best New Artists, it's not just an open door into a career. And sometimes the being that big in your first year or whatever can be its own set of challenges. having said that, our year was an unbelievable year. For an example, the nominees that year were the Eagles, Loggins and Messina, ourselves, John Prine, and Harry Chapin. So,
Wow.
man, it's a pretty good,
Yeah.
pretty good bat, you know.
Sure.
Did win it, which is lovely.
Yeah.
You'll have that Grammy somewhere.
Yeah, it's I think it's, I see it in the back there. It's on your chair behind that pillow.
Might be. I think it's actually in our California home. Yeah, not here.
Nice. Where are you hanging out right now?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I've been living, my wife is Australian, and we've been splitting our time for the last 8 years or so between Sydney and Venice. But I came down here when all the gigs disappeared in March for us and the entire industry. I got down here to be at this home and be with my wife, and because normally a regular America year is like 200 days of travel on the road and stuff. It's pretty grueling. But, you know, it's just, we've been very, very fortunate here, and the whole virus situation is a lot tamer than it is virtually everywhere else in the world. So I've been very fortunate.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like a fun place to lay low for a little while. Have you had breaks like this in other years? Because I mean, America's been going pretty strong ever since you guys' inception. Is this one of the longest breaks you've ever had from the road?
It is. It's I guarantee I've never, and be the same for Dewey because we've had the same schedule. I've never been anywhere for a year straight. Came down here in March. Actually, I did a month in Venice at our home there, but in April, I've never sat anywhere for this many months straight. As you can see, I'm in a studio. I built a studio here, which has been a godsend. I've always had a home studio, but since we moved into Venice, it's a tiny little place there, and just really wasn't room. And I took some time off from, because it can work both ways. Having a studio there is a lovely thing for the creative process, but it can also suck up what little available time you have. So I gave it a break for a few years. Now I have this studio, and it's really been great because it's given me an opportunity to keep busy and keep my hand in it.
Right. I love the song Tin Man, and I was talking to my dad about it, and I had never thought about this, but he credits that song with some of the resurgence of the popularity of The Wizard of Oz during that time. Because, you know, of course, that's a classic movie. So he said they would play it on TV pretty often, and which is probably why it was kind of in your head to write some of those lyrics. Great lyrics, by the way. Just the metaphor of the Tin Man, you know, already having what Oz gave him. It was a great metaphor. Yeah. But he was saying, you know, he's like, I think that had something to do with kind of the resurgence of the popularity that came out with The Wiz, and you know, and did you feel that way when you saw some stuff starting to reemerge after that song came out?
You know, I don't really follow it that closely. Dewey wrote that song, by the way, Tin Man, and yes, it's got its seeds in the message in that movie, and what a lovely message that is. But as far as if it affects the, you know, certain things, I don't know. You know, a lot of the hits, just in being hits. I was watching a clip of Sister Goldenhair in a movie just recently, and I hadn't seen that particular movie. But these things come across your desk, and you go, "Oh, that sounds lovely" and stuff. But in 6 months later, when it might come out or something, there's a million other things have happened. You might forget it. But it's amazing the example, but it was Horse with No Name, is included in Grand Theft Auto, the popular video game. And we have kids come up to us now that are 10 to 15, 20 years old that say that's their first exposure to our music. They heard it in Grand Theft Auto. So
it's funny because your songs, they have still, like, you know, a lot of classic rock artists don't have as many streams on Spotify or some of these streaming services as you'd think, because they're legendary, but some of them have got their music on these streaming services later, so they don't have the millions that you might think. But your songs, America still has tens of millions, hundreds of millions of streams on Spotify. But that song in particular, I was wondering why it was so massive. That song has, I think, over 300 million streams or something like that on Spotify. And that I would imagine that's part of the catalyst of that.
Well, obviously that is I don't want to call it a new phenomenon, because we've been, streaming has been in our world, the music world and publishing world, for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
But I will add that as you're quite topical, as you're hearing all of these mega deals, Bob Dylan is selling half of his catalog, or Neil Young has sold half his catalog, or it's really all the way across the business now. But the reason that is, or one of the main reasons, is that whereas streaming was a somewhat new revenue stream, to put it technical, it has now been in business long enough, and the numbers have escalated to, like you said, hundreds of millions of streams, or in some cases, billion. My son, Matthew at Beckley, is a producer and worked on the Camila Cabello track, Havana. And he was up for a couple Grammys last year for that song. And that's over 1 billion streams. It's unbelievable, these numbers.
Wow. Well,
as a result, what used to be just a little trickle of, it might get streamed, 1 million times, and that turns into $11 or something. I'm making an extreme example.
I know.
Now the number getting substantial, so investors and funds are starting to look at that as a pretty well guaranteed income stream. So that's what they do. They go to the artists and say, look, you're 60 years old, you're making X amount of money, and they make an offer, which sometimes is hard to refuse. So that's how that's come about in streaming.
So speaking of, we mentioned the Tin Man lyrics and some of the cleverness of that and how it affected the zeitgeist. If you wouldn't mind, my dad wanted to say thanks for being a huge part of his childhood. And so he texted me a quick video clip. So here we go.
Hi, Gerry. I just wanted to say thank you very much for your music over the last half a century. It's amazing when you look back at it, but I've been listening to you, and my friends have been listening to you with me since the 1970s. We never get tired of any of your music, so keep that up. My sister Mary, when you wrote that song "Only in Your Heart" way back when, that really meant a lot to her, because she was in high school at the time, and with all the trials and tribulations of growing up in the 70s in high school, that song actually gave her strength, and she used to listen to it a lot. So thank you very much for that. I did have one question, Gerry. On the song Ventura Highway, there's a song about purple rain, or a reference of purple rain. So I'm wondering if Prince, if you ever talk with Prince about it, and if he got his inspiration from the lyric, America's lyric, Purple Rain, in that song. And I know it's been many years, but I've kept 2 of them cold. They've been in the back of my refrigerator. But you've been there and I've been here, and we haven't had any time to drink that beer. So next time you're in San Diego, make sure to stop by, give me a call, and we can have those 2 and a few more. So take care, and keep the music flowing. We really appreciate it.
So a little Sandman reference at the end there.
Yeah.
And when he said
I was talking, realized he's on it's recorded, but anyway, give him my best. He looks very well, your dad.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I'll let him know. He's for sure. Believe me, he's going to watch this. So, but he,
what he said was that, and it is, I don't really know the chronology of this, but one thing I do know is that the reference Purple Rain, which Dewey wrote in Ventura Highway, was long before Prince's famous song and movie, etc. But I do think that there is some reference, that he made some reference that's where he got it from.
Oh, really?
I'm a little hesitant to put that in, but I think that he's on record as saying that's where he got it from. Because a lovely line and a beautiful image and stuff. And again, Dewey writes some incredibly visual stuff, if you consider all the stuff in Horse with No Name and Tin Man and all these. So it's not unusual to pluck just a little snippet of that out, and he built a whole song around it, which I think is lovely, beautiful. Beautiful
Sure.
track.
Well, very cool factoid, and which may or may not be true. We'll double check. People, I'm sure your fans will double check that
Yeah.
now. But I thought that was a really cool question because I'm a big Prince fan as well. But he had his little quote. I'm not sure if you recognize the Sandman reference at the end there. But I thought that
Of
was
course.
I thought that was a great line for quarantine that we're all, you're there, I'm here, and let's sometime soon get a beer. But I thought that was a more relevant line now than ever.
Well, he's in San Diego, which is one of our favorite cities. We play San Diego every year, and really look forward to getting back there. We do Humphreys, a beautiful outdoor venue down there, and
Yeah.
we played it. I think we had the record for something like 28 straight years we played Humphreys.
Wow.
So things like that are wonderful memories to us, and it's a beautiful city. So please give him my best, our best.
I definitely will. He'll be more than excited to hear your response. So Gerry, you've over the years, tens of millions of album sales, multi platinum records, and you're still doing it. You're still going strong. You still look great. You look healthy. You look happy. Tell us tell us a couple of your secrets, man. How do you keep it going?
Well, and I think I can safely speak for Dewey in this regard, that we both really enjoy what we do. I can tell you that it is a lot of work physically. I'm 68 years old now, and I've been doing this for 50 years straight, which is an amazing number. But it becomes more and more tiring. It's harder to get your body out and about and sit in airplane seats for hours on almost daily. But having said that, the shows just seem to be, with each given year, that much more rewarding. Obviously, a lot of the fans have been with us since the start. I have an anecdote that I say, when the guy who's driving us, the runner for the gig is driving us, and he says, "I can't believe I got you guys in the car and stuff." I go, "Yeah, that's great," and he says, "I can't wait to tell my grandfather." And you've been in business long enough. No longer, I gotta tell my parents. Now I gotta tell my grandparents. So anyway, it's a badge of honor, and I think we're fortunate, but we also do take care of ourselves, eat well, exercise, all of the tricks. We've often said the secret to our success in being partners for all this time is that we're balding at the same rate, which is obviously taken some of the pressure off.
Well, you still got a pretty good head of hair there, my friend. So you guys are going at a pretty good rate then.
Doing all right.
So, and besides America, I mean, that's not enough for you. You've had a solo career as well. I mean, you just put out a new single, Self-Image, just what was it, a couple weeks ago? Your newest album, Discovering America, just a couple months ago, last year. And like you said, 50th anniversary of America. So congratulations on that. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about the new stuff you've been working on.
Well, there is a solo compilation. It's called Keeping the Light On. And I've been doing In the Gaps, which is a little bit hard to explain really, because there's not a lot of gaps. But as I said, I have a home studio, so I would often continue to record. I come from the school of you got to write 10 to get 2. And my point there is that not everything you put pen to paper is just going to work or be a success or something. But it also, I like to mention that it doesn't mean that the other 8 are just crap, that they're unusable, So there's a lot of material. I'm pretty prolific. And as a result, I've cut quite a few solo albums, 6 or 8 solo records over the years. And the label Blue Élan that I've been working with is asked if they could do a compilation, which I was very honored. And that's coming out in the next month. And it's a lovely package. It's 20 tunes, and there's a vinyl edition. There's a double vinyl edition. So it's a real honor, to have that be, I don't even like to say in parallel. It's in parallel as far as time goes, but there's no way that it can weigh or compare to the body of work that Dewey and I have done over the years. We lose track of those albums because there's, as far as a count goes, because there are so many reissues and not even bootlegs, but just international packages where different countries will reissue certain things. But, I remember a fan one time came with a board where he had swapped with other fans, all these different covers and stuff. And the board had 100 different releases on it. I thought, well, I'm probably can remember about 50 of those, but there's a bunch. You know, if you're swapping single covers with the Brazilian label, you know, you're going to see some things that are just amazing. You didn't know released. The joke is that we're still waiting on the revenue stream for a lot of those releases, but I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. We're doing all right.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you guys are doing a little more than all right, but it definitely wouldn't be a surprise if you're waiting on some checks in the music industry, right?
Yeah, sure.
So besides, congrats on the 50-year anniversary, and looking forward to listening to the new single work that you got coming out. Congratulations on Vocal Group Hall of Fame. I know you were inducted in that some years back. You're on the Hollywood Walk of Fame here in Los Angeles now. That happened, almost 10 years ago now. So pretty epic stuff. I just wanted to say, Gerry, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, man. You're a living legend. Your music is legendary, and it's been a real pleasure. Such a nice guy. We like to end the interview by asking if you had one piece of advice for aspiring artists, what would it be?
Well, it sounds a little cliche, but I, for years, would speak at Loyola and talk to a music course there, which was a lovely class of all different things, writing and music law and music publishing and stuff. But I always revert back to the old chestnut of try and be true to your heart. When you're in the creative world, and this doesn't just go for music, painting or writing or whatever you're doing, the best self that you can present is the most true to what you are, because you are the one ingredient that is unique that you're bringing to the table. There's nobody that is exactly the combination that you are of all of these things you've heard and listened to and seen in your life. And the closer you can get to making that be what you bring to your people and you present to the world, I think the happier you'll be, because it's hard enough to, to hold on to any success in this business, but it's a tougher thing as you rise and fall with all your different efforts. If you find yourself making excuses and saying, oh, I didn't really like that song anyway, or it was an A&R guy that talked me into, if you know that what you're presenting is something that really came from you, from your head and heart, through your hands or mouth or whatever, then I think it helps you sleep at night a little better.